welcome to my first Calathea Q&A, my question and answer. These are just a few of the questions that I've gotten a lot over a short period of time here that I think I've never answered in a video before. So I'm putting them all into one spot. Just a quick warning, I am not an expert. What I'm sharing with you is based off of my own research and off of my own experience, and sometimes just kind of observations that I've made. So take that with a grain of salt. Understand that you are an expert about the conditions in your own home, and the things that I do might not work for you, but maybe they're helpful. So let's get started. How much light do you give your Calatheas and why? I realize now that I've never answered this question in depth or with any visual examples. So let's start. You've seen my Dottie a lot probably lately, but this is in an eastern window. It gets direct morning light, and then there's a structure outside reflecting light back, so it gets very bright indirect light for the rest of the day. And I've gotten it to flower quite a bit. I think it's because it does get a lot more light than you would think to, give a Calathea based on a lot of the recommendations that I see, that they're low light plants. Yes, and the idea of low light and what that is, I think varies. So for me, if I had this further away from an eastern window, I don't think that would be enough light, and I certainly don't think it would flower. If my Syngoniums can handle this, trust me, the Calathea can. Somebody did mention in the comments that Calatheas grow in their area outdoors and that mine are getting too much light. They like a lot of shade. They're in densely forested areas. Here's my Freddie. It flowered as well in a southwest facing window, but it's indirect light, but very, very bright. My Picturata argentea in an eastern window, it flowered December and January. I wish I never moved it into the plant room. You can see its flowers here. So the light inside, even the direct light, because of the type of glass in my windows and the screens and even the blinds, though they're open, is far less light than full shade outdoors. Full shade outdoors is way brighter, and it's actually too bright in my region for Calatheas. If you take a Calathea where I live, now this is a Picturata argentea, and you put it in full shade outside, its leaves will curl almost immediately to protect itself because the light is way too intense. So in my house, getting some direct morning sun, that doesn't bother my Calatheas at all. When I have a larger window, this is a sliding glass door, I mimic the outdoors in that I have my fiddle leaf figs there. This margarita is getting that filtered light because it is a much larger window. It's in a much more direct spot for the sun rays. You can see I've got some cat hair here. We're gonna talk about that. I got questions about that. It really likes it. Any Calathea that has been here loves being here. And so I would say that the idea that Calatheas are these really low light plants, I'm sure they could be, but I don't think I could get my Calatheas to flower indoors if I didn't give them this kind of light. And this is the floor right under that margarita, so you can see the kind of early morning sun that it's getting. And this is the culprit of cat hair. My Fucata is flowering again. It was flowering when I got it, and now it's flowering again. And so the idea of what low light is, in your house in an eastern window, getting some direct light through a screen and through glass that's meant to really protect the house, the energy use in the house, far less than outside in full shade. Where do I make cuts on my Calatheas? And I always say, if you have an old leaf, cut it down as close to the surface of the soil as possible. But then some really smart people have been asking me recently, very closely together, asking me, well, how do I avoid cutting off any potential new growth? So here's an example of a plant. It's a halo that I got, and this is how it came from a nursery. You can see that it probably had an old damaged leaf, and they cut it right off at the leaf base, right? So most mature Calatheas that I get that come directly from nurseries, not from a retail outlet, I tend to see these cuts, and I think sometimes they make them right before they ship them. You can see here that at the apex of these two stems, there could be potential new growth. And the way that you avoid hurting growth that is on the same existing rhizome or any new growth that might come up through that rhizome, you just cut it off at the leaf base, and usually what happens is that it leaves that stem undamaged and you don't thwart any new growth that might be coming up from the rhizome. Now, of course, Calatheas have creeping rhizomes. That's how you would propagate them through division, right? The rhizome will grow under the soil, come up in a new area. New growth will come up in a new area that looks really detached from the plant, and you can eventually, once it starts to mature, that new growth, separate them. And I did that with my Stromanthi last year, and you can see here that even though it was divided, this plant actually has 2 new creeping rhizomes that have formed new growth. But I don't have any Calatheas to cut, but in the Marantacea family, they're very similar. You see people call these Stromanthi Calatheas all the time. So I'll show you how I cut the leaves versus the stems or the growth. Let's take a look at where I would cut this tip. So it was a little close to the window, which was drying over winter, but I also thought I saw spider mites on it. I kind of got spider mite fever, and I took it outside and I hosed this thing down around the time that my Picturata argentea had problems. So I prefer when I can cut diagonally like this and it mimics somewhat the shape of the tip, but you can't always do that. I do leave a little border of brown. I don't like creating new wounds. But let's take a closer look. You can see here this rhizome, this new growth that's come out of a rhizome. And so it's going to create an existing sort of structure like you see behind the new growth. And there's an older leaf that's on it. Sometimes you don't have to cut at all, gently tug. I could tell that this was getting discolored, so that there was likely some damage that was happening below the soil. And sure enough, this was starting to just kind of wither up from the bottom out. And here's the other rhizome, this other creeping rhizome. I'm gonna have to repot this. I didn't think these are really fast growers, so I'm gonna have to do something. So I've pushed them a little further back from the north-facing window. Here is my Monstera deliciosa that I had to cut up. It got very eaty. Another victim of the plant room. It was starting to stretch. Now, how is the neem oil soil drench actually doing? Has it damaged my Calathea? Made a whole video about this, and as you can see, the Calathea is recovering. A lot of the damage here is going to be from something I didn't discuss with you the first time. This looks like the start of mold or fungus on the leaf. That was from the humidifier leaving moisture to just sit on the surface of the leaf. A lot of the burnt tips that you see, that's from tap water. That's because I took it outside and I hosed it down when I first saw the spider mites. The new growth looks so beautiful. It is a little bit damaged because the roots are damaged from the tap water that I used. However, the plant is recovering. So the neem oil soil drench, it's been the most effective thing I've ever used, but I do have to use it at least once a month. And I also at least 1 to 2 times a month need to treat the plant topically with neem oil. But the leaves are sitting in a much more relaxed position. The plant is less stressed and there's a lot more movement happening. Now, when you use tap water, this is some of the new growth. This is one of the first pieces that came up, burnt to a crisp. This is what will happen if you use tap water over time. You will see this stunted, mutilated growth come up that's just completely burnt. So if you're seeing that on your plant, right, how do I get distilled water then? Especially somebody wanted to know without generating a bunch of plastic waste. I use a countertop water distiller. This is from H2O Labs, not sponsored. I bought this. This is model 300 SS. It's my latest model. And this is a glass. This is really the only thing I had to assemble was getting the handle on this carafe, but I just set this thing down in the sink. I fill it up with water. I want to say that it's approximately a gallon. There's a line inside of the canister that lets me know kind of the max amount of liquid it can take. If I put the lid on, what it does is it keeps me from getting water everywhere. I'm notorious for just dumping things, and to kind of keep the water in the canister having the lid on for me really helps because I don't like to go slow. But you can see I put the top of the unit on, it's got a fan on it, so it is a little bit noisy. So if you're sensitive to noise, you might want to do this overnight when you're not in the room. If you're not sensitive to noise, this isn't really going to bother you. It's a kind of low hum that the machine makes, but the water will turn to steam, evaporate, and then it's going to become water again and come out through that spout. Now, tap water leaves a lot of residue, so the citric acid that comes with it, I put in a couple tablespoons when I see buildup on the bottom and the sides, and turn the unit on without the top on, and what happens is then that it breaks that stuff up, and you see some of it here floating in the water. It is hot, so you would be careful. This is hot water. It's making the water very hot, and I can empty it out when I've unplugged it and the water's cooled down and the residue comes right out. So what actually happened to your plant room? That's a good question. It was a disaster. So one of the problems with the plant room is that you see I've moved everything around the window. So where I'm at in the summer, the sun actually tracks really far north, and so this room gets a lot less light. And it doesn't have enough, or it didn't have enough air circulation, and so running a humidifier even once a day was actually creating a condition where moisture was sitting on some of the leaves, and that can really start to cause fungal problems, mold problems. So we had plants that were over humidified and then not humidified enough as I was figuring it out. So I've gotten things kind of balanced and healthy again. Cross your fingers for me. I can do a more detailed video about it later, but that's kind of what happened in here, and this is what it looks like right this second. I've moved a lot of plants out, by the way. They're back all over the house. How many pets do I have? I've gotten this question a lot because I mention cat hair on my plants all of the time. So I have 4 pets. I've got 2 cats and 2 dogs, but this is the main culprit. She likes to clean herself by the plants and rub herself on the plants. And you can see here, this is my dog. She actually has a little bit of the cat on her right now. You'll see her paw that cat hair off her nose. That's why this sheet is on the bed. Now, this is our newest addition to the house, and he sheds a lot, and I have a feeling that their hair together is gonna be just a disaster, but one that I'm more than willing to deal with. But these are all of my pets except for one. I have a very elusive cat who you don't see here. She's hard to get on film, but maybe someday. So I hope that this answered these are the bulk of questions that I get. I get the same questions over and over again a lot of times because people are smart and great minds think alike. So if you have a question that you've never seen me answer, you feel free, leave that in the comments and I can make a part 2 to this video at another date. But I hope that this answered for those of you who are wondering about different things. I'm not an expert, but I'm definitely willing to share what I've learned, or what I know, or what I'm doing at the moment. So until next time, be well and take care.